Greetings, it's Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance, and we are joined by Ted Lieu, member of the California State Senate, now a candidate for the United States Congress. Who knew? I mean, when I heard Henry Waxman was retiring, I was stunned and shocked. But given that you do represent significant portions of his district in the state Senate, it wasn't a big surprise that you decided to throw your hat in the ring.
It was a surprise that he announced his retirement.
Right.
Congressman Waxman is a living legend, and his work has made America a better place to live.
So let's talk about this district. The 33rd Congressional District
Yes.
goes from Agora Hills along the coast, jets in a bit in the west side, and then goes down to the Palos Verdes Peninsula.
Yes, and in my state Senate district, I represent 86% of the congressional district.
Okay.
And before that, when I was in the state assembly, my assembly district was mostly nested within the congressional district, it was nearly half. So I represented the voters in this congressional district, many of them for very many years.
And what's so interesting about California is state Senate districts are larger than U.S. congressional districts.
That's correct. That's a unique fact about California.
Very unique. I got to ask you, though, it must have been a tough decision. You could have run for re-election to the state Senate, a safe seat. You're well-liked in your district. You have younger children. This is a big move. Was it a tough choice?
It was.
Yes.
I had no challenger for the state Senate.
Right.
I would have gotten re-elected.
Sure,
so
presumably, yes.
I'm giving
yes.
that up. This is a big risk. But let me tell you why I'm running.
Please, absolutely.
And let me take you down memory lane.
Go.
About 5 years ago, when California was facing many of the same issues that America is facing today.
Yes.
We were in deep political gridlock.
Yes.
With a budget deficit of over $40 billion, and we were on the verge of a government shutdown. But we didn't do that. I was on a speaker's leadership team. We worked with other legislators, and we made the hard choices that stabilized California and put the state back on track.
That being said, you were on the leadership team because the Democrats controlled the Assembly. You're in senior leadership in the Senate, chairman of certain committees, because the Democrats control the Senate. The House of Representatives in Washington is in Republican hands, and while anything could happen, pundits would be surprised if the Democrats take the House back. So are you ready to march into an institution where the majority wields tremendous power and you would not be in that majority?
I am, because again, taking it back 5 years ago, keep in mind the minority party, the Republicans at the time, still had more than the two-thirds.
Right.
So we didn't have two-thirds, so we really had to negotiate.
Right. Back then, there was no proposition
Correct.
which allowed a budget to be passed.
That's right. So it's very similar to now, where you have to come together, work together, and we did that. And now, as a result, we have an over $2 billion budget surplus. We've increased funding education, and then because of a law I authored just earlier January of this year, over $3 million in climate change grants were given across California.
And I want to talk about the budget momentarily. First, though, I want to ask you about the California Democratic Party. For those that may not be aware, there is a process whereby a candidate can seek the endorsement of his or her party prior to a primary election. So several Democrats in this case could seek the party endorsement, and under certain instances, a candidate can receive that official party endorsement.
Yes.
I have to say I was stunned, not that you shouldn't have received the endorsement, but in order to receive a pre-convention endorsement, you needed to land 70% of the delegates.
Right.
And you did.
I did. 70% is enormously high bar.
Right.
It's beyond two-thirds.
Right.
It's really,
yes.
really high. And I got 73%. My opponent got 8%.
Right. Her name, Wendy Gruhl, someone who's fairly well known now. She was close to becoming the mayor of Los Angeles.
I think it turned out that way because my opponent does not live in a district.
At this stage, yes, that's true.
And this was an overwhelming victory from Democrats, from Calabasas to Santa Monica to Palos Verdes.
Right.
They just came out and supported me. And what that means is
Now,
that
what does it mean? So great. So you're the party endorsed candidate. What does that mean?
It means that I go on the consent calendar, and
Okay.
it's basically a ratification.
Right.
It's like a rubber stamp.
But more importantly, what does it mean in terms of the campaign?
So what will happen is after the California Democratic Party convention in March,
Right.
I will be the official Democratic Party endorsed candidate.
Okay.
And in a congressional district that is heavily Democratic, that is an amazing endorsement to have.
But does the party send out mail?
Yes.
Do you then get phone bankers from the party?
I get
you see what
all
I'm saying?
the full benefits
Right.
of being the endorsed candidate of the California Democratic Party. It is a major endorsement. That's why all the campaigns fought very hard to keep me from getting it, and I got it.
So how?
Because I represented so much of this district for so many years, and I fought for the issues that they cared about, from protecting the environment to increasing funding to education to champion civil rights. So these Democrats, the local Democrats, knew me.
Right. So for argument's sake, you're victorious, and you go to Washington. We have spoken many times about some federal issues together.
Yes.
The NSA. You've been very verbal about the NSA. I don't think you ever expected when you were so verbal that you would wind up possibly having a vote about the NSA.
Well,
but be that as it may, what national issues are you most passionate about?
Well, so climate change is an important issue.
Mr.
Waxman championed. And I want to also focus on climate change adaptation. We know that if we just went dark right now and did no energy for the next 10 years, it wouldn't matter, because we've already created enough carbon in the air that the Earth will heat up for the next century. So we know we're going to have a hotter climate, more extreme weather events, and we need to start adapting to that and start thinking about how we can better prepare our coastline, how we can make our communities and cities more resilient. We need to start thinking about that now.
So one could argue, though, that one could effectuate change in that arena more likely in Sacramento than Washington, because, again, the Republican Party is in the majority, and there are climate change deniers that seem to have tremendous power.
Well, the other thing that's happening in Congress, you're seeing a changing of the guard. You're seeing some of the longtime folks retire and new people coming in. And my hope is that as that starts changing, there'll be more opportunities for bipartisanship, more opportunities to get things done. There is one area where we can have bipartisanship, and that is the strong support for Israel. And we absolutely cannot have Iran get a nuclear weapons capability of any sort ever.
It's interesting you mention Iran, because there has been some friction in the Democratic Party relating to Iran. On the one hand, there are those that think that Iran could never be trusted, and as a result, they're willing to impose sanctions right now, whereas President Obama has said he wants to give diplomacy a try. And so where would you come down on that question?
Well, so
if you know yet.
Sure, I think it's wise for the U.S. to use our assets and our sources of power, from diplomacy to economic sanctions to a threat of military action.
Right.
But at the end of the day, there is no world government that has any enforcement authority. There is no sort of super body. It really is about power and about what a country can get away with or not get away with. And I do not trust Iran.
But should we give diplomacy a try? Should we give President Obama, I know you're not there to vote yet, but the ability to at least, I think he asked for a 6-month window?
I think giving diplomacy a try is fine.
Okay.
But I think what's more important is making sure that they never come close ever to a nuclear weapons capability.
What about Syria? Because the pictures out of Syria are devastating.
Yes.
Heartbreaking.
Yes.
What can we do?
I think if earlier on we had sided with sort of their insurgency and backed them, things might be different now. I think now it's a little too late.
Right. I mean, we did avert a conflict with them. I remember, 6 months ago, we were on the verge of a conflict.
And it's a very messy situation. I'm not sure there's much we can do right now.
And how does Israel play into all of this? I mean, it's kind of ironic. We know that Israel's accepting patients from Syria and trying to assist, but they're right on that border. There's spillover. Jordan's being impacted. I mean,
so what's interesting about Israel is that they will do all sorts of humanitarian operations, and like you said, they're accepting patients from across their borders. As you know, they also provide electricity to the Gaza Strip, while Hamas is sending rockets over to Israel. And we would never tolerate that in the U.S.
We'll have to see what happens. His name is Ted Lieu, member of the California State Senate, also a candidate for the United States Congress. The primary is in June 2014. I'm Brad Pomerance. It's Charter California Edition.
Since the House of Representatives has sat 435 members of Congress, which party has held the most seats and how many seats did they hold? Democrats 334, Republicans 302, Democrats 301, or Republicans 298. The Democratic Party held 334 in the 75th Congress from 1937 to 1939.
This is California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance, and we are joined by Eric Bauman. He is the chair of the Los Angeles County Democratic Party, also the vice chair of the California Democratic Party. And so I'd like to speak with you about the health of the Democratic Party. I think it's fair to say over the last 20, 25 years, the Democratic Party has really blossomed in California. I mean, Michael Dukakis did not carry California in 1988, but since those days, we have seen California not really even be contested by the Republican Party.
You know, California is the big blue beacon of America for Democrats. Democrats all across America look to us for leadership. They look to us for success. They look to us for ideas because we have connected with the people of California in a way that nobody ever expected back when Pete Wilson ran for re-election baiting immigrants.
It's interesting you mentioned that because we think about that 1994 election. Pete Wilson was successful, as were other Republicans down ticket. It was a tough year nationally for the Democratic Party. But that being said, we look at statewide offices today. There are no Republicans in the statewide office.
And we're going to try to keep it that way.
I'm sure you are. But what's also interesting is as we look towards 2014, the election this year, we really haven't seen many Republicans declare for statewide office. We do have a couple on the governor's side, but I mean, I follow politics, and I'm not sure who's running as Republican statewide for down ballot races.
I think 2012 had to be the nadir for the Republican Party in California. Their registration is below 29%. They don't hold any constitutional office. They lost. They're not just minority, but they're super minority in both houses of the legislature. We overwhelmed them in the Congressional District. And they did one very smart thing. They elected Jim Brulte to be their new chair.
Who is very gifted.
And for those, those of your viewers who don't know Jim Brulte, he's former Senate Minority Leader and Assembly Minority Leader for the Republicans, a very, very smart, tactical guy who's realistic. And one of the things he's trying to do is refocus the Republican Party in a way that might enable it to connect better with Californians. But here's the reality. California is a place where talking about same-sex marriage is not an issue. California is a place where, by and large, most people embrace immigrants because we are a state of immigrants. California is a place where we believe that women should have all the rights that men have and maybe a few extra. And so the very base core conservative agenda is antithetical to what most voters in California feel.
That being said, recently there was a mayor's race in San Diego. San Diego, a county that had been becoming more blue. President Obama carried it in 2012, yet Republican Kevin Faulconer won the mayor's race. That, is a pretty positive harbinger if I'm a Republican.
It's not a harbinger of anything. There has been a Republican mayor of San Diego for over 20 years. One exception was when Bob Filner ran and got elected a year and a half ago. But here's the thing. In special elections, Republicans vote better than Democrats. This is a problem we have in every level of office. Furthermore, for some reason, the city of Los Angeles, even though it is a Democratic city, has elected many Republicans in the mayor's office. City council is overwhelmingly Democratic. In fact, I think every member of the city council but one is a Democrat. It is a very peculiar mix of people in San Diego. They are socially moderate, they are fiscally conservative, and you have to just be in the right place at the right time, and a special election is a tough one for us.
Right. You mentioned supermajorities, and it is undeniable that 2012 was quite a year for the California Democratic Party. I don't think anyone expected either the California Senate or the California Assembly to go supermajority, which means 2/3, and yet that happened. There have been ups and downs with it because of special elections like you mentioned, but as we speak today, the Democrats do hold supermajorities, which has been invaluable, an invaluable tool for the supermajority party. But as we look toward November, the question is, can the California Democratic Party keep supermajorities in both houses?
So let me back up for just 1 second. For many, many years, people like me said to the people of California, give us the tool to pass a budget with just Democrats, and then if we don't do our job, fire us. Well, when the voters of California gave us the tools for the legislature to pass a simple majority budget, lo and behold, the budget became balanced. As a result, and following that, and because of tremendous leadership by the leaders in the Senate and the Assembly, we got 2/3 in both houses. We have used it carefully. We have not overspent. We have not overreached, and Governor Brown has made sure of that. And as a result, I think we're poised to do really well in November. Will we hold 2/3? It's hard to tell in an off-year election, especially the second midterm election of a president. But we have good candidates running up and down this state.
You mentioned Governor Brown, and I recently interviewed a Republican member of the legislature, and he called Governor Brown the best Republican governor they could hope for. How would you respond to that?
You know, it's fantasy land for the Republicans. I mean, think about it. The two candidates the Republicans have running for governor, one is a guy who stands on the border with a rifle trying to shoot immigrants, and the other is a guy who embraces same-sex marriage and ran the TARP program under George Bush. Okay, they are so disillusioned.
But if you think about Governor Brown, you know, he is running a very fiscally conservative shop. We are in surplus, and, you know, the state legislature, both houses would like to see a universal transitional kindergarten. The governor has been a little wary on that. So can the Democrats work with this Democratic governor to try to spread a more progressive agenda?
I think we have spread a more progressive agenda, but we have created a fiscally sound agenda. And that's why we're trying to get on the ballot a measure that will allow us to create a rainy day fund. Because, you know, we're in good times, we're in better times in California. Not great times, but we're in better times. And revenues are coming in high, and Proposition 30 has helped a great deal. But the inevitable turn of the business cycle will be that the economy slows down again. And if we want to protect services for seniors, health care for the people of California, the class sizes and needs of our school system, we have to make sure we have money in reserve. And that's why they're being fiscally prudent.
Let's talk health care. It's hard to deny that the Affordable Care Act had a bumpy rollout. It's also hard to deny that, generally speaking, Covered California's rollout was not bad. There have been some bumps in the road. And so when you look at polls on the Affordable Care Act in California, they're not as troublesome if you're a Democrat than they may be nationwide. But there are some congressional races that are going to be tight. And if the Democrats have any hope of taking back the House of Representatives in Washington, they're going to have a good day in California. So talk to me about the Affordable Care Act, how it plays in California in your mind, and how it will impact these races for Congress that really will be pivotal.
Well, let's start off by talking about the fact that we created on the Medi-Cal side for low-income people space for 1.4 million people to get health care.
That's through the expansion.
Through the expansion of Medi-Cal or Medicaid.
That's
as it's
only about
country.
25 states accepted.
Correct. Second of all, in our Covered California program for individual people in the individual marketplace, making healthcare both affordable and blocking pre-existing conditions from being a screening tool has had a dramatic impact. You know, as of January 31st, 3.3 million Americans have signed up for healthcare under the Affordable Care Act across the country, but we're at over 1 million in California.
California's a beacon, as is Kentucky of all places, but be that as it may.
But and so, having said that, yes, there are hiccups in it, but anytime you try to mass transform something that involves every American, it is a huge undertaking.
You know as well as anyone, better than me, that all politics in the end is local. So when you think about key districts, when you think about, you know, Scott Peters, when you think about Ami Bera, when you think about those races, Jeff Denham, that are going to be really tight, what and how does the Affordable Care Act play? How does immigration reform play?
You know what? I think this is how it plays. Every person who has health insurance next November who didn't have it last November is going to vote for a Democrat. Every person who got health care despite the fact that they had a history of cancer or hypertension or diabetes or heart disease or AIDS is going to vote for a Democrat. Everybody who's able to keep their kid on their plan until they're 26 years old is going to vote for a Democrat, because they're going to understand that it was Democrats who believed that health care is a right for all, not a privilege for the special few.
How do you get them to vote, though? How do you get them to the polls in an off year, 6 years into a presidential cycle?
You know, that is the magical question. And if I told you the answer here now, I couldn't let you air this show. But we are hard at work to make sure that we have a plan in place to turn out Democrats from the top of the state to the bottom of the state, and we're going to be working very hard to do it. And I think our track record shows in 2010, in the last midterm, that we can do very well here, because this is a big blue state.
His name is Eric Bauman, chair of the Los Angeles County Democratic Party, vice chair of the California Democratic Party. I'm Brad Pomerance. It's Charter, California edition.
Which California county includes the highest percentage of registered Democrats? Alameda, Los Angeles, San Francisco, or Santa Cruz? Alameda County has the highest percentage of Democrats in the state. 56%.
Welcome back. It's Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance, and we are joined by Professor Stephen Manley. He is a professor at Cal State Long Beach in biological sciences. If you love the oceans, I know you do, you'll want to hear this discussion. He received a lot of ink over the last few months in connection with Kelp Watch 2014. Let's back up a bit and talk about how Kelp Watch began. And it starts with the Fukushima earthquake in Japan, March 11, 2011.
That's correct. And
please, what happened?
And shortly thereafter, I decided that it might be interesting to sample kelp to see if they've taken up any of the radioisotopes that were released into the atmosphere and that rained down along our coastline about 14 days afterward.
So this key right here is atmospheric radioactivity.
Absolutely.
So not that came from the currents across the ocean, but came through the atmosphere because the Fukushima nuclear plant spit out radioactivity.
Yeah, a lot of steam and aerosol that contained a variety of radioisotopes.
And so about 2 weeks later, you did some sampling, and what did you find?
Well, we were specifically looking for iodine-131, which we knew was released into the atmosphere, and which I had the instrumentation to be able to detect. And knowing that kelps concentrate iodine several thousand-fold, we decided to go out and collect it. My collaborator on that study was Dr. Chris Lieu. And
here at Cal State?
Yeah, he's a colleague in my department. And lo and behold, we detected it in kelp.
You did?
Yes, we did, at significant over background.
So what did that tell you? Did that tell you that there was some risk at that time to the kelp, to the sea life, to humans, or was it not high enough to cause concern?
Well, it was 2 to 3-fold higher than background radiation that we find. Kelp does concentrate some naturally occurring radioisotopes. And iodine-131, although probably not harmful to kelp, kelp's pretty rugged, you know. But if it's ingested by certain animals, specifically fish, it can get concentrated in their thyroid tissue. And just like iodine can get concentrated in human thyroids, fish have thyroid tissue that concentrate iodine. And that may have been deleterious to some fish. We'll never know.
What we do know, though, is that just looking at various currents, that if the radioactivity from Fukushima was to come to our coast via current, it's going to happen soon.
Well, yes, it's several years now since the release into the ocean also, and currents are very slow.
Right.
Half a mile per hour to 3 miles per hour. So it's taken all that time for that, what we call plume, that contains some radioisotopes, to make its way close to our shoreline. It hasn't hit yet. It's projected to arrive about mid-2014.
And so that's where Kelp Watch 2014 comes in.
That's right.
As we talk about that, I want to get a sense, what exactly is kelp, other than the obvious? We know what it looks like. And why is it that kelp is such a great specimen to use to track this potential radioactivity?
That's an excellent question. First of all, kelp is a special type of brown seaweed. I guess if you were going to characterize it, it has very visible blades, which are leaf-like structures, and branches, which we call stipes, and it's anchored to a rocky substrate with a holdfast.
I have to say, I was in Catalina over the winter holidays. I went snorkeling with my daughters. It was truly majestic to snorkel right off the Catalina coast into these kelp forests.
Yeah,
they were, I mean, literally, if you ever seen a little girl's eyes light up, that's what I saw.
Right, you get the same feeling in a kelp bed that you do in redwoods.
Well stated.
It's unbelievable, and it's different colors, the browns and golds. And if you were there on a sunny day,
we were, and then the Garibaldi that are swimming through, and the rays, and
well, you know, the kelps. Well, what they are, you asked me, they're basically a group of seaweeds.
But that begs the question, what's their purpose? And that's where the Garibaldi come in.
That is right, that's right. They're the basis of what we call the kelp forest ecosystem. They're the photosynthetic organisms. They're not plants, but they're plant-like.
Right.
That will basically produce biomass that other organisms feed upon. So they're at the base of the food web. You know, like corn. We grow corn for food, and we feed on it, and so do a lot of insects and things.
Right.
Well, kelp gets fed upon by at least 40, 50 other organisms. Directly.
And then those that are feeding on kelp may be fed upon in the kelp forest. So that's why, as you describe it, it's the bottom of the food chain.
Right, that's right. And there's over 500 species. Some would say there's 1,000 species directly and indirectly associated with the kelp forest ecosystem. So it's one of the most complex and most highly productive ecosystems on Earth.
We know that kelp grows very fast. Now, I had asked you before our discussion, well, have you tested the kelp in Hawaii or in Guam? And you immediately informed me that.
Right. Kelps don't grow in tropical waters. They like cold water. And as we'll probably get to, there are some kelps in Baja, but they're only found where deep cold water comes to the surface. So in tropical waters, there's not any kelp at all.
Okay, so you now have partnered with some friends at UC Berkeley, Livermore Lab, to look at whether and when this radioactivity hits our coast through kelp.
That's correct. We're using kelp sort of as our sentinel out there. It's a good organism to use because you find it from San Diego County all the way up to the Oregon border.
Really?
There's two species we're using, and those are the canopy-forming kelps. And the kelp you were diving in was a canopy-forming. That's giant kelp. But we're also using what we call bull kelp, a different species, because there's certain locations where giant kelp isn't found, but you'll find
And when you
kelp.
say canopy, what you're describing is, so the kelp grows to the surface and then grows horizontally.
That's right.
And I've seen that.
And that's one of the adaptations that it has that allows it to grow so rapidly. It puts most of its surface area and biomass at the surface, and those broad, thin leaves are designed to capture sunlight. It's a big target, but also absorb nutrients and other substances that are in the water.
But given, I'm digressing for a second, given they grow so fast, why haven't they completely populated the ocean? Or the cold parts of the ocean? Is there enough, are there enough predators?
Well, they grow fast, but they do get disturbed by storms, and there is some natural senescence involved, which means that when they send up a frond, at least in southern waters, south of Point Conception, those fronds only last for 6 months. But then they send up a new one. Or they break off due to storms or
and we see it on the coast, for example.
Or if you speedboat through it, you're going to rip some out.
Now, what's different about the radioactivity that may be detected in the kelp this time, as opposed to through the atmosphere, is it's simply different. It's not the iodine-131. It's
it's two radioisotopes of cesium.
Why?
Iodine-131 has a very short half-life, so it decayed away before it got very far from Japan. But these have 137 has a half-life of 30 years. 134 has a half-life of 2 years. So there's still a significant amount of that left in the water.
So if we do find these cesium isotopes in the kelp, is there cause for concern?
Probably not, but there's no cause for concern because kelps contain a lot of natural radioactivity. The most abundant radioisotope in kelp is potassium-40, which is found all over the globe. It's a naturally occurring radioisotope. And just like bananas concentrate potassium-40, kelps happen to concentrate it also. They concentrate potassium by a factor of almost 10.
So what's the benefit then to collecting the data? What will it teach you? Tell us.
Well, there's a couple of reasons why I decided to. First of all, to the point, even though we don't expect the amount to be found in kelp, we do expect to see some, and it's good to know what's in there. Because if it gets into kelp, even at very low concentrations, we know now it's going to be dispersed along our coastline in the kelp forest ecosystem and probably beyond. So if it's harmful or not, probably not harmful. But as a scientist, and as a matter of fact, the public wants to know too.
No doubt.
There's a lot. The public is very, very concerned.
I want to thank you for joining us. My name is Brad Pomerance. This is California Edition.